The stars had always seemed full of promise to humanity. For 300 years, they had traveled among them, built colonies on distant worlds, and learned to live alongside alien species they had once only dreamed about. They signed treaties, paid tributes, and followed every rule the Galactic Concord set for them. Earth believed that patience and cooperation would earn them a place of respect among the elder races. Commander Daniel Greer stood on the bridge of his ship, the ESV Defiance, watching the peaceful darkness of space through the main viewport. He was a tall man with gray at his temples and eyes that had seen too many battles. Today was supposed to be a day of celebration. It was First Contact Day, the anniversary of humanity's introduction to galactic society. His crew had decorated the mess hall. Someone had baked a cake. His communicator beeped. Then it beeped again. Then it would not stop beeping. The first distress signal came from Arcadia Prime, a beautiful colony world where 300 million humans lived in gleaming cities surrounded by purple forests. Daniel's wife, Linda, was there. His daughter, Katie, had just started school there. He had spoken to them that morning. Linda had laughed about the flowers blooming in their garden. The signal was simple and terrible. They were under attack. Daniel watched the feeds as they came in. Calorian warships filled the skies above Arcadia Prime. Their weapons turned cities into fire and ash. The images showed people running through streets that melted beneath their feet. He saw buildings collapse. He saw ships trying to escape being shot down one after another. He tried to call Linda. There was no answer. He tried again and again until a junior officer gently took the communicator from his shaking hands. Arcadia Prime was not alone. 16 other human colonies were burning at the same moment. The attacks were coordinated, precise, and overwhelming. The Calorian Dominion had sent enough ships to ensure that no human world could defend itself. 4 billion people died that day. Daniel did not cry. He did not scream. He simply stood very still as something inside him turned cold and hard. Around him, his crew wept and cursed and demanded answers. He had none to give them. Dr. Samantha Voss received the news in her office on Earth. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and silver hair, and she had spent 20 years of her life building bridges between humanity and the alien races of the galaxy. She had believed in diplomacy. She had believed that words could solve any problem. She immediately contacted the Galactic Concord, the ancient organization that governed relations between all spacefaring species. High Arbiter Zethal, the leader of the Concord, agreed to speak with her. His face appeared on her screen, a pale oval with too many eyes and no expression she could read. Samantha demanded to know why the Concord had not stopped the attack. The Calorians were members of the Concord. The Concord had rules against unprovoked aggression. Humanity had done nothing wrong. Zethal's response was calm and cold. He explained that the Calorian Dominion had filed territorial grievances against humanity decades ago. The Concord had reviewed these grievances in a closed session. They had voted. The human colonies had been deemed provisional under clauses in the original treaty that humanity had signed 300 years ago. The attack was legal. The attack was sanctioned. The Concord had approved it. Samantha felt the floor shift beneath her feet. She asked to see these clauses. Zethal sent them to her. They were buried deep in documents that human lawyers had reviewed countless times. But the language was tricky, full of alien legal concepts that did not translate well. Hidden meanings lurked beneath innocent words. The elder races had planned this from the beginning. They had written the treaties to give themselves an escape route. Whenever humanity grew too large, too successful, too ambitious, they could simply activate these hidden provisions and cut them down. She brought this information to Admiral Megan Sinclair, the head of United Earth Naval Command. Megan was a woman who had spent her entire life preparing for wars she hoped would never come. She read the documents in silence. Her face did not change, but her hands gripped the edge of her desk until her knuckles turned white. The United Earth Council met in emergency session. Representatives from every human world that still existed gathered to hear the truth. Samantha stood before them and explained what she had learned. The Galactic Concord was not a fair organization. It was a system designed to keep the elder races in power and everyone else beneath them. Every species that had ever grown strong enough to challenge the established order had been destroyed. The elder races called it maintaining balance. They spoke of peace and stability while they murdered anyone who might one day become their equal. Humanity had been marked for death from the moment they reached the stars. The council chamber erupted in chaos. Some demanded immediate retaliation, others called for negotiation, for finding some way to make peace. A few simply sat in stunned silence, unable to process the scale of the betrayal. Admiral Sinclair stood and waited for quiet. When she spoke, her voice was steady and hard. She told them that for 300 years, humanity had believed in the goodness of the galaxy. They had trusted in treaties and laws and the word of species far older than themselves. That trust had cost them 4 billion lives. It had cost them their innocence. The elder races wanted humanity weak and afraid. They wanted humans to accept their place at the bottom of the galactic order. They expected humanity to bow their heads and submit, as every other young species had done before them. Sinclair smiled, and there was nothing warm in it. She told the council that the elder races had made a terrible mistake. They had assumed that because humanity followed the rules, humanity was incapable of breaking them. They had assumed that because humanity sought peace, humanity could not make war. They had forgotten the most important thing about the human species. When pushed too far, humans did not surrender. They did not submit. They fought back with everything they had, and they did not stop until the threat was destroyed. The council voted. The decision was unanimous. On distant ships, Daniel Greer received new orders. He read them once, then read them again. For the first time since watching Arcadia Prime burn, he felt something other than cold emptiness. He felt purpose. Earth went silent. All communications with the galactic network stopped. Human ships withdrew from joint patrol routes. Ambassadors packed their things and left their posts. The galaxy believed humanity was accepting defeat. The galaxy was wrong. The silence lasted for 3 weeks. Across the galaxy, alien governments watched and waited. They had seen this pattern before with other young species. First came the shock, then came the grief, finally came acceptance of the new reality. Humanity would lick their wounds, bury their dead, and learn to live within the smaller borders the Concord had drawn for them. High Arbiter Zethal sent a message to Earth offering terms for peace. The terms were harsh. Humanity would surrender 60% of their remaining territory. They would reduce their fleet to 100 ships. They would pay tribute to the Calorian Dominion for the next 1,000 years as compensation for the expense of the military action. Earth did not respond. The Dreth Empire, one of the oldest and most powerful members of the Concord, sent their own message. Ambassador Vorketh expressed sympathy for humanity's losses and suggested that cooperation would prevent future misunderstandings. The message made clear that resistance would only lead to more suffering. Earth did not respond. Deep in the asteroid belts beyond Mars, something stirred. Lieutenant Ryan Castillo had served in the Earth fleet for 15 years. He thought he knew everything about humanity's military capabilities. He was wrong. His commanding officer brought him to a facility that did not exist on any map. They traveled through tunnels carved into rock, past security checkpoints manned by soldiers he had never seen before. At the end of the journey, he stepped into a cavern so vast that clouds formed near the ceiling. Inside that cavern floated warships, not the small patrol vessels humanity was allowed to build under conquered regulations. These were massive things, bristling with weapons, their hulls dark and angular. Ryan counted 50 of them before he stopped counting. His commanding officer explained. For 200 years, humanity had publicly obeyed every rule the Concord set for them. They had limited their fleet size, restricted their weapons research, and reported all technological developments to the proper authorities. But secretly, in places like this cavern, they had been preparing for the day when obedience was no longer enough. There were 12 facilities like this, one scattered across human space. Each held a fleet. The ships used technology that the Concord had banned humanity from developing. Weapons that could crack planets, engines that could slip between dimensions, shields that could shrug off attacks that would vaporize conventional vessels. The elder races had underestimated humanity. They assumed that because humans were young, they were simple. They never considered that a species could smile and nod while quietly building the tools for revolution. Ryan received his new assignment. He would serve as tactical officer aboard the ESV Defiance, under Commander Daniel Greer. The old fleet was being reorganized. Officers were being reassigned. The hidden ships were being brought out of the shadows. War was coming. Across the galaxy, Nathan Holbrook sat in a cramped room on a space station deep in Dreth territory. He had been living among aliens for 7 years, pretending to be a trader, building connections, gathering information. He was one of hundreds of human agents scattered throughout the galaxy. Invisible networks that the elder races never suspected existed. When the attacks on human colonies began, Nathan's handlers had gone silent. He assumed the worst. Then, 3 weeks later, he received a single coded message through channels he thought had been abandoned. The message contained 2 words: "Send everything." Nathan understood. He compiled every piece of intelligence he had gathered during his years undercover: trade routes, military deployments, political secrets, dirt on every major figure in Dreth society. He encrypted it all and sent it back to Earth through a chain of hidden relays that would take days to complete. The most important information concerned the attack on humanity itself. Nathan had suspected for years that the elder races coordinated more closely than they admitted. Now, he had proof. The Calorians had not acted alone. The Dreth Empire had provided targeting data. The Veth Collective had contributed jamming technology to disable human communications. Even species that publicly expressed neutrality had voted in secret sessions to approve the genocide. The entire galaxy had conspired against humanity. On Earth, Dr. Samantha Voss received Nathan's intelligence reports and began assembling them into a weapon more dangerous than any warship. Facts, evidence, proof of every lie the Concord had ever told. She did not just want to defeat the elder races in battle. She wanted to tear down the entire system they had built to maintain their power. The Galactic Concord had ruled for 8,000 years. In that time, dozens of species had risen to challenge the established order. All of them had failed. They failed because they fought with ships and soldiers alone. They never attacked the thing that truly held the elder races in power: legitimacy. The Concord was not strong because it had the biggest fleets. It was strong because everyone believed it represented fairness, order, and law. When that belief crumbled, so would the Concord itself. Samantha began planning broadcasts that would reach every corner of the galaxy. She gathered testimonies, documents, and records that showed the true nature of the system. The hidden clauses in treaties, the rigged arbitrations, the species that had been quietly exterminated when they became inconvenient. Every secret would be exposed. Admiral Megan Sinclair reviewed the military plans one final time. The hidden fleets were ready. The crews had trained in secret for decades, preparing for battles they hoped would never happen. Now, those battles were inevitable. She spoke to her senior officers via secure channel. She told them that for 300 years, humanity had done everything right. They had been patient, cooperative, and trusting. The reward for their good behavior was the death of 4 billion innocent people. The time for patience was over. The time for cooperation was over. The time for trust was over. Now was the time for consequences. Commander Daniel Greer sat alone in his quarters aboard the Defiance. On his desk was a photograph of Linda and Katie, taken during their last vacation together. They were smiling, unaware of what was coming. He looked at that photograph every night before he slept. He thought about mercy. He thought about restraint. He thought about all the noble concepts that had guided humanity's behavior for 3 centuries. Then he thought about cities burning, about ships full of refugees being shot down, about the calm voice of Zethal explaining that the slaughter was perfectly legal. Daniel put the photograph away and called his officers to the bridge. It was time to begin. Across human space, engines hummed to life. Ships that had been hidden for generations emerged from their concealment. Crews who had trained in darkness finally saw the light of open stars. The fleet moved toward the border. The galaxy had no idea what was coming. Nexus Station was the heart of the Calorian Dominion's military power. It hung in space like a metal moon, surrounded by 12 battle fleets and protected by shields that could withstand the heat of a dying star. For 5,000 years, it had never fallen to any enemy. The Calorians believed it was invincible. Warlord Sithax stood on the command deck of the station, watching reports from occupied human territory. The conquest was proceeding smoothly. Human survivors were being processed. Resources were being extracted. Soon the Calorian Dominion would control space that doubled their empire's size. He received a message that human ships had been detected approaching the border. He laughed. The humans had perhaps 200 vessels capable of combat. His forces at Nexus Station alone numbered over 1,000. Let them come. Let them learn the price of defiance. The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system. Calorian sensors counted the enemy ships. 300 vessels, more than expected but still hopelessly outnumbered. Scythax ordered his fleets to form a defensive formation around the station. This battle would be over quickly. Commander Daniel Greer stood on the bridge of the ESV Defiance, watching the enemy arrange themselves for slaughter. Lieutenant Ryan Castillo reported the disposition of Calorian forces. They were doing exactly what the tactical simulations had predicted. Daniel gave a single order. Begin! The human ships did something impossible. They flickered out of normal space and reappeared inside the Calorian formation. Not near it. Inside it. Suddenly, the carefully arranged defensive lines meant nothing. Human vessels were everywhere, firing in every direction. The Calorians had never seen weapons like this. Human guns fired kinetic rounds, accelerated to nearly the speed of light. Each impact released more energy than a nuclear bomb. Calorian shields, designed to deflect energy weapons, shattered under the physical assault. Human ships danced through the battle in ways that broke the laws of physics. They would be in one place, then simply not be there anymore, appearing somewhere else entirely. Calorian targeting systems could not track them. Missiles fired at human vessels struck empty space. Scythax screamed orders at his commanders: form new lines, concentrate fire, adapt to the enemy tactics. But his commanders were dying too fast to respond. Flagships that had survived 100 battles exploded in seconds. Experienced captains vanished in flashes of light. Ryan Castillo managed the tactical display, coordinating attacks across the battlefield. He had trained for this in simulators for years, but the reality was different. These were real ships dying, real beings burning in the vacuum. He pushed the thoughts away and focused on his job. There would be time for reflection later. Maybe. The battle lasted 11 minutes. When it was over, the 12 Calorian fleets had ceased to exist. Wrecked ships drifted through space. Leaking atmosphere and bodies. Nexus Station hung dark and silent, its shields collapsed, its weapons destroyed. Daniel brought the Defiance alongside the station and ordered a communication channel opened. Scythax's face appeared on the screen. The warlord who had ordered the deaths of billions looked old and frightened. Scythax offered surrender. He would give humanity anything they wanted. Territory, resources, prisoners returned. Just stop the destruction. Daniel's voice was calm when he responded. He told Scythax that 4 billion humans had died under his orders. 4 billion people who had done nothing wrong, who had trusted in treaties and laws to keep them safe. Women, children, elderly, newborns in their cribs. All gone because the Calorians decided human lives were worthless. Surrender was not something humanity accepted anymore. He cut the channel and gave the order to fire. Nexus Station broke apart under the bombardment. Its core went critical, and for a brief moment a new sun burned in the darkness. When the light faded, nothing remained but dust and debris. The message was sent on all channels, in every language, to every corner of the galaxy. Humanity was no longer prey. Humanity was no longer patient. The rules had changed. Panic spread faster than light. The Dreth Empire mobilized every ship they could find. Ambassador Vorketh demanded an emergency session of the Galactic Concord. The Veth Collective sealed their borders and recalled all citizens from foreign space. Species that had considered themselves safe suddenly realized they might not be. High Arbiter Zethal addressed the Concord in a broadcast seen by trillions. He proclaimed that humanity had violated 17 articles of their treaty. They had developed banned weapons. They had attacked a member state without provocation. They were now classified as a rogue species, enemies of galactic civilization itself. All Concord members were authorized to use maximum force against human targets. Admiral Megan Sinclair watched Zethal's broadcast from her command center on Earth. When it ended, she turned to her staff with a smile that held no warmth. She told them that the Arbiter still thought his treaties meant something. He still believed the galaxy would unite against humanity because he told them to. He had no idea how wrong he was. The intelligence that Nathan Holbrook had gathered showed the truth. The Concord was not a united body. It was a collection of old grudges and secret hatreds held together by mutual fear. The elder races tolerated each other only because fighting was expensive. Younger species obeyed only because rebellion seemed impossible. Humanity was about to prove that rebellion was very possible indeed. The fleet split into task forces and spread across Calorian space. Colony after colony fell. Military bases were destroyed, supply lines were cut. The Dominion that had burned human worlds now watched its own worlds burn. But Daniel Greer did not target civilians. Human weapons struck military installations, government buildings, and infrastructure that supported the war machine. When Calorian cities surrendered, human forces accepted that surrender and moved on. Ryan Castillo asked his commander about this. They had the power to do to the Calorians what the Calorians had done to humanity. Why hold back? Daniel looked at the young officer for a long moment before answering. He said that what the Calorians did was evil. If humanity did the same thing, they would become evil too. Vengeance was not justice. Cruelty was not strength. They were fighting to prove that humanity deserved to survive, not to prove they could be as terrible as their enemies. The fleet moved on, leaving broken military forces but living populations behind. Word of this spread. Calorian civilians who had expected death told others what had happened. The story reached other species. The humans were winning, but they were not monsters. They destroyed only what needed to be destroyed. Some beings began to wonder if perhaps the Concord had been wrong about humanity all along. Dr. Samantha Voss sat in a small room surrounded by screens and data terminals. She had not slept in 3 days. Her eyes were red, and her hands shook from too much caffeine, but she could not stop now. The weapon she was building required no ships or soldiers. It required only the truth. For 8,000 years, the Galactic Concord had maintained order through a simple illusion. The elder races pretended to be fair and just. Younger species believed them because the alternative was too frightening to consider. Everyone accepted the system because everyone thought the system worked. Samantha was about to destroy that illusion forever. She compiled the evidence Nathan Holbrook had gathered, combined it with her own research, and organized it into a presentation that any species could understand. Then she broadcast it on every channel, in every language, to every corner of the galaxy. The broadcast began with simple facts. The treaty humanity had signed 300 years ago contained hidden clauses that no human lawyer had ever properly understood. These clauses allowed the Concord to revoke human territory at any time, for any reason. The elder races had planned to limit humanity's growth from the very beginning. But humanity was not special. Every species that joined the Concord signed similar treaties. Every species had hidden chains around their necks that they did not know about. Samantha showed the records. The Morthani, a peaceful species with a growing population, had been promised expansion rights to new colony worlds 2 centuries ago. Those rights were revoked in a secret session that the Morthani were never told about. They remained cramped in a single system, wondering why their applications for new territory were always denied. The Tellurians had been told their homeworld was protected under Concord law. The truth was different. Their planet had been sold to the Dreth Empire as a mining concession 300 years ago. The sale was simply never enforced because the Tellurians served as a useful buffer state between Dreth territory and their rivals. Species after species appeared in the broadcast. Each one had been lied to, manipulated, or quietly prepared for destruction. The Concord did not maintain balance. It maintained the power of those already in power and crushed anyone who might challenge them. Then came the most damaging evidence of all. Private communications from High Arbiter Zeth Al himself, spanning centuries of secret dealings. He had personally ordered the extinction of 4 species whose only crime was becoming too successful. He had accepted bribes from the Dreth Empire to rule in their favor during arbitrations. He had approved the plan to attack humanity while publicly promising them equal status and protection. The Arbiter was not a neutral judge. He was a tool of the powerful, used to give their crimes a mask of legitimacy. The broadcast ended with a simple message. The system was built on lies. The system was designed to keep you weak. The system depends on your obedience. What would happen if you stopped obeying? The reaction was immediate and violent. On Morthani Prime, crowds gathered outside government buildings, demanding answers. When their leaders admitted they had known nothing about the revoked expansion rights, the crowds turned their anger toward the Concord itself. Riots broke out. Morthani ships began ignoring Concord patrol routes. The Tellurians withdrew their ambassador from the Concord headquarters. They announced that any Dreth vessel entering their system would be considered hostile. Border tensions that had simmered for generations suddenly boiled over. Across the galaxy, younger species looked at their own treaties with new eyes. They hired lawyers who specialized in alien legal systems. They discovered clauses they had never understood. They realized they had been living in cages built from words. 3 founding members of the Concord withdrew from the organization within days of the broadcast. They issued statements condemning the corruption Samantha had exposed. They called for reforms, new leadership, transparent processes. The elder races scrambled to maintain control. Ambassador Vorketh gave speeches about stability and order. He warned that chaos would benefit no one, that the existing system, however flawed, was better than no system at all. Some species listened. Many did not. The Concord's enforcement fleets, which had been preparing to attack humanity, suddenly found themselves needed elsewhere. Uprisings on a dozen worlds required their attention. Border conflicts that the Concord had suppressed for centuries erupted again. The organization that had seemed invincible was suddenly fighting for survival. Nathan Holbrook delivered the final blow. He had saved his most important intelligence for last, the Arbiter's personal files. Not just communications, but records of every session, every vote, every deal made behind closed doors for the past 3,000 years. When those files went public, the Concord's legitimacy vanished entirely. Zethal's own guards refused to protect him. Species that had publicly supported the Concord quietly withdrew their endorsements. The great alliance that had ruled the galaxy for millennia was crumbling from within, and humanity had barely fired a shot. Lieutenant Ryan Castillo watched the chaos from the Bridge of the Defiance. Human fleets had captured vast stretches of territory that would have taken centuries to acquire through diplomacy. But more importantly, the system that had tried to destroy humanity was destroying itself. He asked Commander Greer if this was the plan all along, military victory combined with political collapse. Daniel nodded slowly. He explained that Admiral Sinclair and Dr. Voss had understood something important. You could win every battle and still lose the war if the enemy simply rebuilt afterward. The elder races had done this before. They had crushed rebellions, absorbed the losses, and continued as if nothing had happened. This time would be different. Humanity was not just defeating the Concord's fleets. They were proving that the Concord itself was corrupt, unjust, and unworthy of obedience. When the war ended, there would be nothing to rebuild. The old order would be gone forever. Ryan looked at the tactical display showing human positions across the galaxy. They controlled more space than Earth had ever dreamed of holding. Former Concord species were requesting diplomatic contact. The balance of power had shifted permanently. He asked what would come next. What kind of galaxy would exist when the fighting stopped? Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "That was the question that mattered most. Destroying was easy. Building something better was hard. Humanity would have to decide what kind of power they wanted to be. The answer to that question would determine whether any of this had been worth it." The war lasted 8 months. In that time, the galaxy changed more than it had in the previous 1,000 years. The Calorian Dominion, which had launched the genocide against humanity, surrendered unconditionally. Their military was destroyed, their government collapsed, and their colonies were occupied by human forces. Warlords who had ordered the deaths of billions now sat in prison cells waiting for trials they knew they could not win. The Dreth Empire, ancient and proud, fractured into 12 separate states. Each successor government rushed to negotiate peace with humanity before the others could gain advantage. Ambassador Vorketh, who had once spoken of human submission, now begged for terms. He received cold silence in response. The Veth Collective retreated to their core systems and sealed every border. They broadcast no messages, answered no communications, and pretended the rest of the galaxy did not exist. Their strategy seemed to be waiting and hoping that humanity would forget about them. Humanity did not forget, but there were more important matters to address. High Arbiter Zethal was found dead in his chambers on the Concord headquarters station. The official report listed natural causes as the reason for his death. No one investigated further. No one cared. The being who had presided over centuries of corruption and genocide was gone, and the galaxy moved on without him. The galactic Concord itself simply ceased to exist. There was no dramatic moment of dissolution, no final vote to end the organization. Members stopped attending sessions. Staff stopped reporting for work. The great halls where treaties had been signed and disputes arbitrated stood empty and dark. The system that had ruled the galaxy for 8,000 years ended not with a bang, but with a quiet fade into irrelevance. Admiral Megan Sinclair stood before the United Earth Council with a proposal for what should come next. Many in the council wanted humanity to take the Concord's place. They had the military power. They had the moral authority of victims who had fought back against injustice. They could become the new rulers of the galaxy, enforcing their will through the same fear that the elder races had used. Sinclair understood the temptation. After everything humanity had suffered, the idea of standing at the top of the galactic order held obvious appeal. But she had spent months watching what happened when power was used without wisdom, when strength became an excuse for cruelty. She did not want humanity to become what they had fought against. She proposed something different, a new organization built on principles opposite to those of the Concord, transparent governance instead of secret sessions. Equal representation instead of weighted votes favoring the powerful, no hidden clauses, no tribute systems, no mechanisms for the strong to prey upon the weak. Dr. Samantha Voss drafted the document. She called it the Compact of Open Stars. Every article was written in plain language that any species could understand. Every provision was designed to prevent the abuses that had characterized the old system. Disputes would be resolved through arbitration by elected representatives, not appointed judges serving the interests of the powerful. The compact was not perfect. No system created by imperfect beings ever could be. But it was honest about its limitations and included mechanisms for reform and improvement over time. It was a beginning, not an ending. The signing ceremony took place at Arcadia Prime. The colony world had been rebuilt as a memorial and a meeting place. Where cities had burned, gardens now grew. Where millions had died, monuments stood bearing their names in light that would never fade. It was a place of sorrow, but also a place of hope. Commander Daniel Greer attended the ceremony. He walked among the delegates from 40 species. Beings who had traveled from every corner of the galaxy to witness the birth of a new order. Some of them had been enemies months ago. Some had been silent bystanders who watched humanity burn without lifting a hand to help. Now they gathered together, putting their marks on a document that promised a different future. A Morthani representative approached him after the signing. The alien's translator rendered its words carefully, each one chosen with precision. The Morthani said that many species had wondered why humanity did not simply conquer everything. After the war, there was nothing to stop them. Human fleets controlled more space than any power in galactic history. Human weapons had proven unstoppable. Humanity could have become tyrants, and no one could have prevented it. Daniel thought about the question for a long time before answering. He looked at the memorial wall, where 4 billion names shimmered in eternal light. Somewhere on that wall were Linda and Katie, his wife and daughter, killed by beings who saw them as nothing more than obstacles to be removed. He told the Morthani that what the Concord did was evil. They used their power to hurt others simply because they could. If humanity did the same thing, they would be no different, no better. The point of the war was not just survival. The point was proving that strength did not have to mean cruelty, that power did not have to corrupt, that someone could stand at the top and still choose to be just. The Morthani was silent for a moment. Then it said that this answer gave it hope for the future. Daniel nodded and walked away. He did not feel hope. He felt tired and empty and old, but he understood that his feelings did not matter as much as his choices. He had chosen to fight without becoming a monster. He had chosen to win without becoming an oppressor. Whatever peace he might find would have to come from knowing he had done the right thing, even when doing the wrong thing would have been easier. Lieutenant Ryan Castillo watched the delegates disperse from the observation deck of the Defiance. The ship was in orbit above Arcadia Prime, part of the honor guard protecting the ceremony. Nathan Holbrook stood beside him, finally out of the shadows after years of undercover work. Nathan asked if Ryan thought the compact would last. History suggested that all systems eventually became corrupt. The beings who built them died, and new beings forgot why the rules existed in the first place. Ryan shrugged. He said that nothing lasted forever. The Concord had proven that. But humanity had also proven something important. When systems became corrupt, when power was abused, when the innocent suffered at the hands of the powerful, someone would rise to challenge it. Someone would refuse to accept injustice as the natural order of things. Maybe the compact would fail someday. Maybe new tyrants would emerge. But humanity would be watching, and they would remember what happened when the galaxy underestimated them. Far below, the first ships of the new compact departed for their homeworlds. They carried copies of treaties written without deception, without hidden traps, without the seeds of future betrayal. The galaxy had a chance to build something better than what came before. Whether they would take that chance remained to be seen. Daniel Greer stood alone at the memorial wall as the crowds departed. He placed his hand against the light where his family's names were written. He stayed there for a long time, saying nothing, thinking everything. When he finally turned away, the stars seemed a little brighter than before, not because anything had changed about them, but because he had changed. He had carried rage and grief and the desire for revenge across battlefields spanning the galaxy. Now, at the end of it all, he felt something different. Not forgiveness, not peace, but perhaps the beginning of acceptance. The war was over. The old order was gone. The future stretched ahead, unknown and full of possibilities. Humanity had proven what they were capable of when pushed to the breaking point. They had shown the galaxy that they could be the most cooperative partners imaginable, or the most devastating enemies in existence. The choice had never been theirs to make. It had always been everyone else's, and the galaxy had finally learned to choose wisely.